very
times.
relevant nowadays.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, if I can have your attention, please. I see we've reached the magic hour. Carla, roll, please.
Mark Arnold, Whitney Hall.
Here.
Marvin Kusick.
Here.
Betty Mack. David Mason.
Here.
Ulreen.
Here.
Don Roberts.
Here.
James Simonek. Mike Stuber.
Here.
David Trojan. That is a quorum.
We have a quorum, so I hereby call the September meeting of the Metropolitan Area Planning Commission to order. First item on the agenda is to consider approval of the minutes of the regular Metropolitan Area Planning Commission meeting of August 19th, 2019.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve those minutes. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, and that motion carries unanimously.
Do we get to request Cole to read the
We could.
Particular
I
together.
do appreciate Mr. Ream reading that for me. I was not here, and I would have probably still been reading that. I heard you did a good job.
well, thank you, sir.
Okay, item number 3 is administration. Hold a public hearing on ordinances amending the Enid Municipal Code 2014, Title 11, zoning, Chapter 7, commercial districts, Article D, C3, General Commercial District, Section 11-7D-2, District Use Regulations to allow R7 residential multifamily district uses in C3 either as permitted use or a use by review, providing for repealer, savings clause, severability, and codification, and provide recommendations for city council.
So, generally, but not always, we consider uses as they become more intense to include the less intense uses. So most of the time, you got your, if you can have for instance, if you are in R7, you could just have a duplex, but you could do an apartment complex. Or, if you, for instance, in CO, you're limited to kind of, office certain commercial uses, but if it was zone C3, normally you could do the lesser use. Okay. So, and add to that I think that we are moving away from mid-century, last century, to, which was to have purely residential and then everything grouped together. In our quest for walkability, I think we are attempting to have more mixed uses. Mixed uses to a certain extent, having your commercial and maybe your residential on top of it. It allows for people to move about. Most of the time that is done in our community by PUDs, planned unit development, but it could be through this tiered approach. Okay, so R7 multifamily district uses are not right now a permitted use in C3, which is our most permissive zoning, other than C4, which is the downtown, and it's rather unusual. So if you look through here, we've got page after page after page of uses. Well, three pages of uses. And it allows for hotels and it allows for motels. It does not allow for boarding houses or boarding houses. There's two kinds, boarding houses and then rooming houses. Okay. So tonight, we've got two different ordinances plus the status quo. The status quo would be that if you've got a C3 property, and for instance, you've got a big old house on a small lot, and you want to use it for a boarding house, you can't. You would have to downzone it in order to do that. Now, if you wanted to, use it for a hotel, you could. And if you wanted to use it for a motel, you could. You could use it for a dancing school. You could use it for a grocery store. You could use it for metal fabrication, laundry, kennels. But you can't take your large Victorian home and utilize it to have some, a group of 7 people live in the house. You would have to downzone it, and then if you decided later you wanted to tear it down and put in a bank, then you'd have to rezone it again. And you all know more than anyone else that every time you have to do that, it gets expensive, and we try to be business friendly. Okay, so we could require them to downzone the property. We don't have, there was someone that came to my office, and I thought since it was C3, it was gonna be fine. And then I realized, oh, it skips. It goes from like R4, I might get it wrong, but like basically some small multifamily, but it doesn't go all the way up to R7. Okay, and R7 is where we put the boarding houses. Okay, so 1 is recommend city council. No change is recommended. 1 is that R7 multifamily district uses would be permitted in C3. But at the city council study session, I think Mr. Mason said, well, what about unintended, if we do that, then there could be issues. There could be circumstances that we don't want a R7 use in C3. So, okay, then let's do R7 uses in C3 as a use by review. And that allows you to, when the uses recommend, when they found the use they want, they come before you, they post the property, they talk to you, you consider the impact, the unique characteristics, whether or not there's enough parking, the traffic hazards, the utility, the drainage, the noxious or offensive emissions, that sort of thing. In this, I would imagine, I was really thinking of it as those big old houses that are don't have a lot of parking, there are some that are in C3, and it would be an unusual family that would want to raise toddlers on, some of our downtown streets. So those are the 3 options. We're supposed to have a public hearing, and you guys can pick use by review, do nothing, status quo, or permitted by right. Which, if we did that, then it would just have the uses, it would just be one of the many uses on several pages. Any questions?
I do.
Yes.
If they were required to downzone to R7, is that right?
Yeah.
Would the adjoining properties be notified what was going in there and have a chance for appeal, or at least to have their voices heard?
Yes, because the 300-foot list, they would, if they are within 300 feet, they would have that. But use by review, post the property, and if they are nearby, they're going to see this posting that's there for quite a while, saying that there is a proposed use by review.
And at that time, they could come.
Absolutely.
Express, but they wouldn't necessarily be notified. They would just have a sign put up that if you, on this date, there's going to be a hearing. Is that correct?
That's right. It's not the same as getting the notice. On the other hand, part of it is, and maybe you all have a philosophy about this, I'm not sure why on R7 use in a big old house, if it can meet the codes, would be a problem. I don't know why a big old Victorian house has been changed to C3, but it is expensive, and then if they have to, in order just to have, to use it as a boarding house, they've got to do the R7, and then if they decide that they want to redevelop the property, I mean, you're bouncing back and forth. To me, I was unaware of, that much concern about R7 uses in a big old house.
So
But
then
you
my-
guys know more than me.
Okay, my follow-up question, and I've heard multiple times how expensive it is to rezone something. Can you give me an example of about what that would cost to rezone?
You know,
What those fees would be?
I do the law. Maybe Chris can do that. I don't really worry that much about the fees. I just hear the same complaints. But I do know you got to go to the assessor's office and the, maybe not the assessor, but, the abstract company, and they've got to get that. And then there's the notice and stuff, and it takes quite a bit of time. And then they've downzoned it.
I'm just wondering, is that 100, 500, 10,000? I mean, expensive means different things to different.
Okay, it depends on the property involved and how many separate lots are within 300 feet. So if you've got like 2 big property owners within 300 feet, it's not going to be as expensive as if you've got a lot of little lots within 300 feet.
It can be thousands. It can be into the thousands. Generally, it's not, just on my personal experience. A lot of it also has to do with the time. It can delay projects 60, 90 days. And time is money when you're doing a development.
It is
That may not necessarily
significantly
apply to this,
less
but that's
just to post the property and assume that people will drive by if they're interested and then call Chris. And Chris, I will say that Chris and Carla will be able to, if they call Chris and Carla, they will be able to explain it better than the notices they receive with the 300-foot rule. Because I get a lot of calls about the 300-foot notice, and I bet they do too. So in the end, they call the city and ask, what does this mean? Sometimes they say, am I in trouble? No, you're not in trouble. Okay, it's your option. Any more questions?
Chris, can you shed some light on what that would cost?
Yes. All rezoning fees are the same. Doesn't matter whether you're seeking R7, C3, or industrial. The fee to the city is $150. The 300-foot list, we do not quote private sector fees. But my customers tell me that it can be around $1,000 to get that. And I think Commissioner Ream is accurate. If it's in a fairly dense neighborhood, then there's more work that abstractor has to do versus on the perimeter, and it's quarter sections, and within 300 feet you got 3 or 4. There's just fewer owners to identify. This particular location Carol's talking about is fairly dense, so it'd probably fall in that $1,000 to the abstractor plus or minus. And then if you're seeking R7, state law requires the applicant, not the city, to notify everybody within a quarter of a mile. And that costs them nothing. They go to the Garfield County assessor. He or she has the ability to print that list out, and then they do themselves bear the cost of putting the notice in an envelope, paying that out to those people. We provide that notice, but it's their cost to mail it. And I don't know what that costs either, so. Maybe a couple $1,000, $1,500,
And
I'm guessing.
And actually, we've done that, and I think that the reason why we did that is probably because I told everyone that we had to do the quarter of a mile, and this is not really relevant to this, but in looking for another purpose, I did, and actually, I think your son, Mr. Trojan, talked to me about this. The reason is that state law says that multi-residential multifamily residential properties, multifamily residential there's facilities, requires a quarter-of-the-mile notice. It turns out that facility is a word of art, and so is halfway house, and so is all of those things in this special law that was passed a couple years ago. They are all defined by statute. And so, yes, absolutely, if it is actually going to be a multi-family facility as defined by state law, they would have to do the quarter-of-a-mile. I had not realized that multi-family facility was a term of art. So there could be quite a few multi-family facilities that are not. What that is specific for drug and alcohol uses. And you have to dig deep into the statutes to figure that out. But it is a term of art. So to a certain extent, I just don't want anyone to be misled. We have been requiring it on all multi-family uses, but in reading it, I haven't asked the Attorney General for his opinion, but it is specifically defined in, I think, Title 63. So, yeah, that's more than anyone else would ever want to know about it, but
Does R7 allow for all of those types of uses you just explained to us, from a halfway house to a group home to a boarding house? Is that R7? Do all those
Yes.
fall in R7?
Yes.
And so the people that would be neighbors wouldn't really have an opportunity, I mean,
well, if it's those weird kind of R7 Title 63, getting particularized care from a licensed facility, then they would have the quarter-of-a-mile. The other thing is that it also, there's lots of other uses. The facilities, for instance, that happens in hospitals and stuff, and that's in C3. I guess what and that would be a good reason to consider use by review if, you are concerned about R7 residential multifamily district, but generally we consider those like, apartment complexes or boarding houses and stuff. This quarter-of-a-mile is very specific, it turns out, to involve licensed care providers with the state, involving drug and alcohol, not everything, but drug and alcohol rehabilitation.
what's the downside of the use by review? It seems to me we have a specific use in mind, and it's going to be clarified for those purposes. Is there a downside to the use by review option?
I don't see one for use by review. It's the middle ground. I think that it probably is good, but maybe Chris knows one that what do you think about use by review?
Zoning requires 20-day notice in the local newspaper. It requires the city to mail notices to everybody within 300 feet, 20 days. And it requires the sign to be posted on the property for 20 days.
Yes.
Use by review, there is no notice in the newspaper. There is no notice mailed to property owners within 300 feet. The sign is posted on the property for 7 days only. That is the notice. Now, if it's one of those multifamily uses that Carol talked about, that notice, it goes out to 30 days in the newspaper, 30 days to the property owners, and the sign is in the yard for 30 days. So there's your difference. I don't know if that's a downside. Those are just simply the facts.
What's the downside of keeping it the way it is, other than expense of getting it zoned?
I'll defer to legal counsel.
Okay, I can explain that. One of the things is that we have some properties in C3 that are these, we got some C3 houses that don't have very much, they're on prime real estate and they don't have very many uses. They were developed a long time ago, and the property is C3 and it doesn't have a very big parking lot and it doesn't, children are not gonna be playing there and stuff. You could either put some, you could put in the C3, here's an example, you could, in this, in a big Victorian house, you could put a dispensary, a grow house, or a processing situation for the new burgeoning industry of medical marijuana. But I would think that it would be less strange in some of these old houses that have, frankly, I don't know how they get zoned C3. Maybe they just are left over and everybody else zoned their property C3. Okay, so what's the downside to that? At some point, we might have created a situation where there's no viable use for that piece of property. And if there's very little viable use for that property, then it will get run down.
Couldn't that property be rezoned? Everybody else had to go through that. Why should they get a break?
Because, okay, they could do the use by review, they can rezone, down zoning is not generally the idea is that when you get your property zoned something, that you go through that because it's a better significant use for it. And generally, when you upgrade, you keep all the uses, so you're not losing anything. When you downzone, then you're taking a piece of property that could be redeveloped for C3 or used by C3, but now you're rezoning it to a lesser. That's it. In general, I thought we were still doing, now there's some communities that no longer do that, but that we generally climb the hill and we don't make people climb back down. There are exceptions. But I just am providing you the options and you guys make your suggestion. I do think that the use by review is a good middle road. For one thing, you guys will be able to, when it comes to you all, and, when it comes to this body, I think you guys can protect the neighboring properties if there's something to be needed to be protected.
So if we have a big old house, C3 allows for motels and hotels.
Yeah.
If we're not putting in methadone clinics, homeless shelters, those kind of things, and Marvin and I inherit a big old 10-bedroom house, and we want to turn it into a boarding house, wouldn't it just be easier to add boarding houses to this existing list?
Yes,
And
that
let
is,
and let the fire marshal determine how many bunk beds we can put in there?
right, that's one version. But then, that was the one
Which
that.
version is that?
Okay, that is the one that has the underlines, R7, okay, on the first page. If you see an underline, that means I added it, okay? So, one version says, any use permitted in R7 residential multifamily district. And then, the other version, which says permitted use, you turn to page 4, and I have R7 residential multifamily district uses.
So the backstory on this is that Hope Outreach is wanting to put in a boarding house in one of those large houses down there. They do not want to go through the rezoning process. So we're trying to make a change in ordinance for one situation. Now, I am not opposed to mixed use, have no issue with that at all. I like what Hope Outreach is doing. I don't really have an issue with that. My concern is if we just throw that over into this C3 and everybody says, well, look, what all can already go in there, you know, maybe we need to look at that, right? What all can go in there, but that's a different night. But all of a sudden, all those homeowners that have homes around there that own property then do not have an appeal at all. It just happens without short of showing up and getting a permit. Next thing you know, you have a boarding house right next to you that has former nonviolent, non-sex offenders, you know, which I think those people need somewhere to go. I'm not opposed to that. I'm just saying, the more we put into this list right here, the less voice the citizens of Enid have.
You have people that are not under DOC control, they're not under drug court control. It's the same kind of similar thing that Jeremiah Heron did.
It's exactly the same
Piece of
thing.
property, we want to house people in it, that's what.
Yeah, and I'm not opposed to that. It always makes you line up on one side or the other. What I'm saying is, I think that when that goes in, those people that live adjacent to that property are within a certain amount of limitations, whether that's 300 feet or quarter mile seems like a long ways, but 300 feet anyway, that way it'd be the adjoining property. They should be able to come right up here, sit out there and make a voice.
And don't
have
you
a
think
voice.
they should be the same 30 days of the sign and the same types of alertness that goes on with the zoning changes as they are now?
Or when we,
Right.
or when we do something, we had one the other day going, to ag, we do it with C3. When we're going from ag, or when we've got people in here that are doing final plats and things, that property had to be zoned, because once upon a time, everything here was ag.
Yeah.
And the city's.
And the reason for having 3 different options here to look at is that I was opposed to that. And I thought possibly that a use by review might still give an opportunity for these people, but yet expedite it a little bit. But I'm glad to find out that it's $1,000. I mean, in the scope of the entire project, I don't see that as being expensive. I see that as a cost of doing business.
7 days in a sign is not enough for me, especially if you have absentee owners that do not live in town. That's not fair.
I mean, I didn't think so, but, I mean, personally, I think it ought to stay just like it is. I think if they want to put that facility there, which I will probably eventually vote for, I just think they need to rezone that.
I think we could open Pandora's box about, I mean, I could sit here for an hour and talk about churches that are in special use zoning and dentist's office in special use zoning that I can't put counselors in or accountants because the zoning won't even allow for a variance. I mean, we could open Pandora's box and just start changing all of our zoning. That's one of my fears. And I think we've got a really, having looked at other cities, we have a very clear, very concise, and quite honestly, very permissive zoning. We could be Edmond and have 20 commercial zonings and be very confusing, but I think we have a really concise one now, but that's my opinion. I would make a motion to kind of leave it like it is.
Second.
All right, thank you, guys. I have a motion and a second to follow as what's listed here, do nothing, and allow the regulation to remain the same. All those in favor, aye? Aye. Those opposed? And that motion is unanimous.
Need people on
Okay, paragraph number 4 is zoning. The first one is, well, the only one, is to consider a rezoning for property, 2 tracts of land, both located in the northwest quarter of Section 12, Township 22 North, Range 3, west of the Indian Meridian, Garfield County, State of Oklahoma. one tract of 8 acres more or less, and a second tract of 30.67 acres more or less, located at the northeast corner of Champlin Road and Highway 412, from A1 General Agriculture to I2 Light Industrial. Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Planning Commissioners. Kings Plains Wind Project is requesting this rezoning. The large box outlined in yellow just simply represents the size of their wind farm. The two smaller blue boxes that are right here is the area we're considering this evening for recommendation to the Garfield County Commissioners on how to rezone that. This is in the county, so your recommendation will go to them and they will make the final decision. Here's a little closer shot. The small square up above here will actually be used by the wind project. The larger square is going to be, it's a electrical transmission station. That's probably substation. Thank you, Carla. They are building that, but they will ultimately be transferring that to OG&E. So that's why they're two different tracks. They currently are zoned agricultural, the Garfield County zoning ordinance. They're seeking I2 zoning, which is correct, for a substation. When we look at rezonings, we want to make sure we have access to road, water, and sewer. In this case, direct truck access will be off of Champlin Road. They are working with the Garfield County Commissioners on a road maintenance agreement that will address what needs to be done in order to handle the truck traffic. There is no public water or sewer. That'll all be done private. And staff answer any questions for you.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and second to approve.
Please note, I need to excuse myself because it's client's property.
Oh, okay. Are you're excusing? Thank you, Commissioner.
Okay.
And the FAA and Vance is good.
I'm glad you asked the FAA question. We do have some tall structures inside the substations. Just a couple, maybe 3. Vance Air Force Base has reviewed those. They are okay. The applicant is getting their approval from FAA. When they have that, we'll come back to you at a future date to get a use by review for those taller structures, just like you've done in the past for wind turbines that were within your jurisdiction, or a cell tower, et cetera. Thank you for asking that question.
Can we just do the zoning when we do the use by review?
We're going to do the zoning tonight. We're not ready to do the use by review because we don't have the FAA report yet.
Okay, I have a standing motion and a second. Is everybody still okay with that? Okay, I have a motion and a second to approve item 4, the rezoning for the 2 tracts of land. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Those opposed? Aye. Did you get that, Carla? Paragraph 5 is easements. Consider a request to close the public right-of-way and easements in the Lahoma edition, including A Street, B Street, C Court, D Court, E Court, and a 10-foot and 20-foot utility easement in the northwest quarter of Section 13, Township 22, Range 7 west of the Indian Meridian in Enid, Oklahoma.
Chairman, this is the location of Lahoma Courts, and you see all these are right away. We got a couple easements. So it's been presented to all utility companies, and everybody accepted, and it is presented for you to close it.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Who's got that second?
Heard Whitney first.
Whitney? Okay. I have a motion and a second to approve the easement. All those in favor, aye? Aye. Those opposed? And that motion carries. Okay, I have several plats. The first plat is to conduct a hearing and consider closing Lahoma Edition plat located at the southeast corner of Cleveland and Garriott in the city of Enid, Garfield County, Oklahoma.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a companion item to the one you just approved that closed all the roads and the easements. This item now closes the plat. It's the same area. This is the plat that'll be closed. The previous item got rid of, or closed the streets and the utility easements. This closes lots and blocks.
Second.
Have a motion second to
Do we have
approve.
anyone signed up? I mean, I'm just, this is a
Oh,
public
yeah.
hearing. I mean, it doesn't look like it to me,
No,
but
thank you, Carol.
officially,
Sure we
Right.
don't run over our own feet there. Thanks.
Okay, so we're still, I still have a motion and a second to approve that?
Nobody signed up to speak on it.
No.
very good.
Okay. Motion and second to approve. All those in favor, aye? Aye. Those opposed? And that motion is unanimous. Okay, plat 2 is to consider approval of the district preliminary plat being part of the northwest quarter of section 13, township 22 north, range 7 west of the Indian Meridian, Garfield County, Oklahoma.
Now we've changed the name to the district. This is the district preliminary plat. And there it is, and you will see that preliminarily, they have identified 6 tracks. 3 are along Garriott, 2 are along Cleveland, and then there is an internal track that will be serviced by 2 50-foot wide public access easements. So there's a total of 6 lots. Are there any questions?
Second.
Again, I had 2 seconds.
I heard David.
Okay. Motion and second was to approve the second preliminary plat. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Those opposed? And that's unanimous. Okay, the third is to consider a recommendation to the mayor and board of commissioners for the district final plat being part of the northwest quarter of section 13, township 22 north, range 7 west of the Indian Meridian, Garfield County, Oklahoma.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have changed the slide down in front of you. This is now the final plat for the district. Has the same 6 lots that we described in the preliminary. When we look at plats, we want to make sure we have access to road, water, and sewer. We do have sewer and water both in Garriott and Cleveland. The applicant is going to loop those services through here, so which is another thing that we like to have is our water systems and sanitary sewer, multiple connections. We have public access to all the lots. It's recommended for approval.
Motion to approve.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to approve the recommendation to the mayor and board of commissioners for plat 3. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Those opposed? And that motion carries. And we're down to variances. Consider a request for a variance to the city ordinance 1061, sidewalks required for a property located at 3114 North Van Buren Road.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There is a variance request for 3114 North Van Buren Street. This is the location, looking north, Van Buren Street, Oxford. This is the property. And there is a sidewalk required based on the ordinance. And here looking, here's a street view, and this is the property right here. And on one side, there is a fence, on the other side, there is a sign, billboard. This is required based on the ordinance 1061. And there is a request for variance, so.
Yeah, I was going to tell you, Mr. Chairman, we do have one person signed up on this item when you're ready.
Okay? Yes, please, if you would, state your name.
Angie Blevins, I'm the general contractor for this property. You can see that right where my Kim is where the property line ends. It butts right up into the fence. If you want me to put a sidewalk on, I can, but I'm gonna run right into the fence. I have the fence, and here's all the electrical power lines that run all the way down the street. So I don't know really what you want me to, where you want me to put it. What do you want me to do?
Chris, how does this fit in our, I know we haven't passed that yet, but on the new ordinance, does that fit within our neighborhood centers or it would just be a neighborhood center at most, wouldn't it?
We have a community center at Willow and Van Buren. This site is north, Oxford about, is that another quarter mile north, something like that? And your proposed sidewalk ordinance says sidewalks on Van Buren from Willow south to Root, so it would not include this site. If the sidewalk ordinance was in effect, they would not be applying for a variance, because it wouldn't be required. Under the current ordinance that requires sidewalks
Right.
almost citywide, with some
I
exceptions.
make a motion to approve the variance.
Thanks, guys.
Froggy.
I have a motion in several seconds
The fourth and fifth of this day.
to approve the variance. All those in favor, aye? Aye. Are there any opposed? Aye. It's awfully quiet. So. Yeah, I'd say that passes unanimously. Okay, paragraph 8 is lot splits. Consider a lot split for Garfield County Industrial Authority, a public trust, which is a part of the Northeast Quarter, Section 2, Township 22 North, Range 6 west of the Indian Meridian, located on Enterprise Boulevard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This slide shows you just where it is in relationship to the community. Willow's on the north, 54th is on the east. The yellow box represents the lot split. When we look at lot splits, like we do in plats, we want to make sure the newly formed lot has access to a road. That's Enterprise Boulevard. It has access to water and sewer. Both of those are in Enterprise Boulevard. It's recommended for approval.
Any questions?
Motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the lot split. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Those opposed? There are none opposed. Last item is the adjourn. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Those opposed? We're adjourned.
Thank you for joining us for the Enid Metropolitan Area Planning Commission meeting. All meetings are broadcast on local cable channel 12 and in high definition channel 112. In addition, this meeting is live streamed on the web at enidtv.org. If you have any questions or comments regarding this broadcast, please visit the City of Enid website at enid.org.